Before we dive into today's conversation, I have an exciting reminder for all my fellow designers and decorators. If you're ready to take your interior design business to the next level in 2025, the Profit Academy for Interior Designers is open and ready when you are. This 6-week online course is designed to help you increase your profits, take control of your business, and charge what you are truly worth. The best part? You can do it at your own pace. So whether you need it to fit into your busy schedule or you're ready to dive in and start making changes today, the Profit Academy is ready for you. With the Profit Academy, you will get a step-by-step roadmap to running a profitable design business, proven price strategies to increase confidently and profitably charge for your time and your designs, templates, worksheets, real-world tools to streamline your workflow, and the flexibility to complete the course on your schedule, because your business should work for you and not the other way around. If you're ready to get started, head to the link in the show notes, and in just 6 weeks, you can be running a more profitable and efficient design business. Now, let's get ready to talk to today's incredible guest. Welcome back to today's episode of the Business of Beautiful Spaces. I'm excited today that we're speaking with Stacy Garcia, the CEO and Chief Inspiration Officer of Stacy Garcia Design Studio. And she's also the chairholder of the Color Marketing Group, a true visionary in the world of design and trend forecasting. Stacy is a trailblazer entrepreneur whose expertise spans across industries and helps designers and brands stay ahead of the curve. She also travels coast to coast, sharing invaluable insights on how cultural, environmental, and technological shifts can influence design. Stacy's work is all about empowering designers and consumers to embrace trends that celebrate individuality, sustainability, and meaningful connection. So in this episode, Stacy is going to take us through the 6 major trends that are defining 2025. From the nature-inspired oasis to the bold and nostalgic retro revival, her thoughtful approach to trend setting bridges the gap between art, sustainability, and her personal expression. I cannot wait to dive into this conversation and explore what is new in design with Stacy Garcia. So let's get to it. Hi there, interior design lovers. Welcome back to the Business of Beautiful Spaces, the podcast where we blend design inspiration with all behind-the-scenes tips and tricks you need to thrive in your business. I'm your host, Laura Thornton, and with over 27 years in this interior design game and running a 7-figure design company, trust me, I've seen it all. I want to be your interior design bestie. I want to help you build the business of your dreams, make more money, and yes, ditch the stress along the way. I've been doing this for a long time, and now I'm sharing my knowledge with all of you, my fellow designers and decorators. All I ask in return is that you like, review, and follow this podcast wherever you listen, so other designers can find us and learn more too. So grab a coffee, get comfy, and let's dive into making 2025 your best business year yet. Welcome back to another episode of the Business of Beautiful Spaces. Hi, Stacy Garcia. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to talk about all things about trends in 2025 with you.
Yes, trends in design and color. Oh my.
Can we jump into how you got started into this industry and what exactly sparked your interest in it and how one becomes a trend like setter, maker, all the good things?
A futurist.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'll take you way back in terms of what I studied, because there's a lot of people who are sort of like, oh, okay, so she's an interior designer. They can't quite put their finger on what I do. She's a product designer. Where does she sort of fit? My background, actually, I studied something called surface pattern design, and that was applied pattern. So we learned how to do designs for everything from carpet to wallpaper, textiles, dishes. It was really fun. And I would sit over a drafting table and finally paint these little pattern designs, which was so fun. And then my first gig in the industry was actually as an intern at Ralph Lauren. And that's where I first heard this concept of licensing, because that's really how that whole brand was brought to market on the home furnishing side. So everything at the time was licensed through different manufacturers that they would partner with to produce each category. And then it would all come together under their showroom. So that's how I got turned on by that and started working designing bedding. So after Ralph, I took a job in Manhattan with a bedding manufacturer, and kind of one thing led to the next. And I developed a love of textiles. And so it's always like this thread that connects the dots. From bedding design, I got a job as a textile designer 2 floors up, because there are textile buildings in Manhattan. So all I had to do was take the elevator 2 floors up and get my next gig. And that was at a company designing hospitality fabrics. And it was at that company that I was introduced to a group called Color Marketing Group. And Color Marketing Group is the premier international color forecasting association. And it was like I had met my people the first conference I went to. And it was fabulous. I met people that were doing all kinds of product development. So, all of the people that were doing the carpet design and the textile design and the furniture design, but also the suppliers to those industries. So I was meeting the people who were doing the yarn extrusion, and I was meeting the people who were doing the chemical colorants that would go into the yarns. And I was meeting people from the consumer side too. So everything from automotive to Kimberly Clark tissue boxes, Crayola crayons, people from Apple used to go to these conferences, cosmetic companies, anybody who had influence over color. And I learned this method of not only getting together and sharing intel and information, like, hey, what are you seeing? Are people leaning more? Do they like the yellows this year? What are the shades of greens? What's important? But the biggest takeaway that I learned being part of this organization was to dig into the why, what we would in the world of kind of trend forecasting call the drivers, the things that are behind the color. Why are people liking those colors? And so I got really involved in that organization over 20 years ago, became a shareholder. The more you volunteer, the more points you get, and took a lot of that process into my own personal practice, into my studio practice, so that we can sort of look through the lens of the industry we're in, which is interior design, not cosmetics, and start to overlay that and say, okay, what are the trends that are happening in the world of interior design? How does that become important in the product that we're developing with our manufacturing partners? And making sure that we're looking at things that are going to live for a long time and not just be a fad.
So many, I didn't even know that was something you could take at school because I really think I would have loved that.
Yeah,
That is
I
like
know.
amazing.
Yeah.
Who knew? And I mean, did you, well, obviously, were you in New York taking that at an art
I was
school?
at Syracuse
Yeah.
University, yeah, in
Okay.
upstate New
Because
York.
that's fascinating. So it's like anything in life. There are so many layers to so many things, and we just get all these beautiful fabric samples and don't think about that somebody somewhere has chosen the yarn, the color, the pattern. Like there's so many things that go, and we just go, "Oh my God, I love this fabric. I can't wait to use it." But you're like 6 steps back at a
Correct.
whole other layer. And I mean, we see things that come out in Europe first, and then at 18 months, it makes it here. Then we've been doing it for 3 or 4 years, and now our clients are bringing us these photos of the things that, how many years are you out and back before you actually see it hit mainstream? Does that make sense? Like how
Yeah,
many?
yeah, no, it does. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, we forecast on a 2 year out. So we're right now looking at 2027.
Wow.
Because it could take us 18 months to develop and, be ready to launch a product. So we have to be working 2 years out with our partners before they even show it to you. So that's our landscape. But the idea of when do we see it and then when do we actually see it gain traction in the North American market, let's say, we could even be at this point on more of a 5 year cycle. You're going to see it before it hits, like you said, kind of more of a mass traction. So I think some things like the economy will slow things down. Obviously, when we hit COVID, I mean, we went into like a 5 year time warp where the things that we were
Hmm.
predicting, just everything froze in time. Even though home furnishings was like a madhouse, everybody wanted to renovate. The the path of how quickly trends were coming sort of didn't come as fast as they normally would have. So there's always things that'll impact. But I would say you're probably be from the time you see it in Europe to the time your clients are really asking for it themselves is probably a 5 year gap.
Yeah, that makes sense because everyone's gonna hate on me, but I am so sick of white oak. I feel like we've been doing white oak for 7 years, and when you just said about the COVID, how it got stuck, I
Yeah.
that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
So what are you designing then? Like, what are your products that you are creating and bringing to market?
So our studio is designing everything from floor to ceiling. So we've got carpet collections that we do. I have for hospitality, we do Axminster, beautiful wool carpets with Brintons. We have a new collection with signature flooring. We're doing SPC, which is a hard surface flooring. broadloom, carpet tile, so everything that you would need for a hotel. And then on the residential side, we have rug collections with Karastan. So, we sort of start at the floor and then we work our way up the walls. So we have peel and stick wallpaper with Next Wall that you can get online. We have commercial wall coverings with Core Seal and York in Canada. They're both distributed through Metro Wall
Hmm.
Coverings.
Hmm.
So that's all great commercial quality vinyls. We have textiles through Libatex and Momentum. So we have beautiful fabric collections. And then we do everything in between. So we've got accessories lines. We're launching a new upholstered furniture line with a company called Edgecombe. That'll be available on Wayfair. So that's going Wayfair exclusive. So yeah, a mix of things. In the hospitality realm, we have a line with Bernhardt. So, again, we can kind of outfit a hotel property almost in its entirety.
So we already kind of covered how obviously things with like COVID obviously impacted trends and your business, and you must be constantly looking at other things like culture. We talked about Europe. Like, what are some of these other influences that come down to helping you forecast?
So there's a couple major drivers that we look at. So you touched on one of them, right? The economy is going to be one. That's a big thing. Political landscape absolutely
Hmm.
impacts where trends happen, how quickly they happen. We're just coming off of a roller coaster of a day. So for the listeners who are listening to this in the future, it's been a little bit of a crazy political landscape. And, tariffs impact people's spending habits. They impact how excited we feel about the economy and where we want to spend our money and how risky we're going to be in design. So, that absolutely has an impact. The environment, right? Sustainability as a major topic, but it impacts the type of materials people want to use, whether or not they want to buy new or upcycled or vintage. So that absolutely has an impact on trend, right? The way we use things in interior design, the materials that we're using, the furniture we're using. We see technology is a huge driver today. It's always been, but it continues to become more and more important. And then the social aspect of things, like we're creatures, we're social creatures. We're all on social media. We're being influenced by each other, by what we're seeing. And so there is sort of this societal swing where different things will come into the ether. And we sort of, if you don't know where it comes from, you're just like, think it's an idea that floated into your head. But, we're all impacted by it. And what's interesting about trends is we don't only see it in color and material and interior design. We'll see trends sort of that, especially from that social cultural impact in food, in flavors, right? Like in scent. So when you think about, things coming into your world and it's like, ooh, all of a sudden, like fig is the new fruit and you're seeing it in every salad and it's in your hand lotion and it's the new scent of candle. All of these are impacted by trend as well. So it's not just a color, it's also surrounding sort of your environment in other ways.
It's funny you say that because I often say, "Oh, it's the new Brussels sprouts." Can you remember how Brussels sprouts like came out of nowhere and they were in everything
Yes,
everywhere? Then it was
exactly.
cabbage. I'm like, "Oh, it's the new Brussels
Hopefully
sprout." I'm
those
like,
are not the new scented
I was
candles.
gonna say, except for it not working with scent. So this is a little off topic, but you might find this fascinating. I didn't know this, but it kind of when you were talking at the beginning of this conversation about all the different layers that go into creating even just a textile,
Yeah,
I ended up at I know I'm a Canadian. Here we go. I was at a hockey game
love it.
on New Year's Eve day, and a gentleman sat down beside me, and we were sitting in like the corporate area. These were corporate seats that were given to us, and these, I guess, were whoever had given us these seats. They were actually his seats. Blah blah blah, whatever. So he starts talking to me about what I do, what do you do, and he owns a company that creates the scents for fast food industry. And so, of course, I'm no longer watching the game, and I'm like, "Tell me more. What does that mean?" And he's like, "Well, have you ever eaten at Tim Hortons?" Now, anyone who's Canadian, it's a
Yeah,
massive chain here, and there's no way that anyone has not. I'm not a regular person; like I don't go there daily, but of course, you've eaten something from Tim Hortons. So he's like, "If you've ever had an eclair, or if you've ever had a jelly filled, I create the scents for the jelly filled donut, or I create the scent of the icing." And I was baffled that these scents are not just like the sugary goodness. And so I was
yes.
thinking about all the layers and how that relates. And then you were just bringing it back to food. And there's always so much more involved in all these industries that we ever know about. And I find that fascinating. And why I brought him up was because it triggered with the Brussels sprouts and the scents and the whatever,
Of
and how he
course.
puts set. And he said, and now we are transitioning into not just food scents, but now we're taking some of these scents that people love and they're putting it into candles and into, so you can soon get an icing smelling candle like somewhere, right? From
I'm
Tim Hortons.
sure. Oh
So
gosh.
it's, oh,
Right.
I know. So it's fascinating to me that these are so many layers to every industry that none of us even know about, and how important they are, or how a scent can bring you to a place and a time or a song or a fabric or whatever the case may be. But I know that we're going to focus and niche down after my little like tangent thing there.
But I'll tell you, Laura, like just to pull it full circle for the
Yeah.
interior designers that are listening or the design lovers that are listening and just sort of want to create a space that feels like you're immersed in it, you're hitting on all the high notes. So it's not just about what are the trends in color or the trends in scent, it's about multi-layered design. So whether it's on a micro level of like, what is the fiber? What is the yarn type? What's the color? Am I going to do an embroidery? Am I printing it? How am I getting the overall aesthetic that I want? But it's also the macro of how do I take a room or a home and create a layered experience. And so, like you said, you're responding to, wow, that fabric's fabulous. And you don't really need to worry about what made it fabulous. Your job then as an interior designer or a homeowner who's trying to build a beautiful space is to go, okay, how am I layering that fabric? Is that going to be a window treatment? What am I doing? Am I putting fringe on it? What direction am I leaning? And then how do I create a cohesive home that's not just beautiful in terms of like, okay, I've understood that I'm going to mix scale with pattern, right? I'm not doing all my patterns tiny or medium. I'm going to do medium, large, some texture. I'm going to have a layered scale. What else goes into my environment? It's my lighting situation. It's sort of making sure that I have not only functional lighting, but also lighting that'll set a mood for me, with an ambient lighting. It's making sure that scent is considered. It's making sure that I always make sure that there's some kind of sign of life in the home, I call it. So some kind of living thing, no plastic plants in our houses. Like we want to have some plants, some sign of life in the space. It gives it soul. I love putting something that's vintage in the space. So it's not all just like, oh, I bought it out of a showroom, and here's my restoration hardware bedroom. But what can I layer into that makes it personal, that makes it mine, that has a story behind it, that represents things that I love. And those are the spaces that have that same nuance of layering because they incorporate all of the senses into the space.
Couldn't agree with you more. Also, just take it one step back again. I guess I went there in my head when you were talking about, again, just layering.
Yeah.
But layering, like the layers of how many people have touched that element that you're putting into that space. So let's just bring it to fabrics. We get beautiful fabrics here, and then you go, ooh, it's $117 a yard or whatever. But now you've given me context of how many, yes, maybe it's comes down to, more particulars of the fabric and the origins but listen to how many people touch that and how
Yeah.
much. And then you think, oh, now it's changed my context to, ooh, it's 117 to, oh, it's only 117. Because
Right.
there's been so much thought, there's been so much effort, there's been so many hands that it's touched, so many people that have had a hand in making whatever this element is. And so that's where my mind went when you first started talking about how many layers back it takes to create that pattern that you're now going to add all these other layers into the room. So, I mean, I'm extruding it back before it even gets onto anything in a home that you're creating as an interior designer. But these are the layers of business that we're just not seeing. We're just seeing the end result at a price point, and now maybe you've given us that back knowledge to appreciate some of these items and how much effort and thought and how many people like yourself are involved in
Yeah.
years prior into making this element hit our sample rooms.
No, I
I'm
think that's a
pointing to
great
it as if
call
you're right
out.
here, but yeah.
No, totally. And
Yeah.
and like you said, you keep peeling it back and peeling it back, but when you think about how an economy works, you're 100% right. I mean, it's everything from if it's a cotton fiber or linen fiber, it's somebody who is making sure that that is first grown from the earth.
Yeah.
Forget the picking of it, right? It's the cultivation of it first, and then the picking, and then the combing of it, and the processing of it, and the spinning of it. It's every step in that supply chain that happens to get that piece of fabric onto your window or onto your
Yeah.
chair.
It's
So yeah,
fascinating.
it is. It's kind of a miracle when you think about it like that,
Right?
about
Yeah.
all the hands that touch it. And I remember reading also about sort of being able to do that from a manufacturing perspective when you say, like, how many people have I helped employ? When you're the designer, you're the homeowner, you're purchasing that piece of fabric, because it's even, down to the people who are on the shipping dock, right? They put it on there, or the people who put it onto the pallet, or the people who inspected those goods before they got wrapped up. So there's so many hands that touch any one item that we might put in our home. I mean, I'm looking behind you, I see a picture frame, I see a light. You think about all of the different hands that had to touch each and every one of those items to get it delivered to your door. And it really, you start to realize the value of the things. And it does, I think to an extent should make us more discerning and more appreciative of how we buy and what we choose to spend our money on.
I know that's a whole other podcast episode in itself, honestly, because it's so deep. But before I know we have to touch on the six
Yeah.
trends, but I want to ask you one more question because you'd brought up technology. And I'm just curious, is technology in the amount, like, are we talking technology that's now like in fabrics that allow us to blot things and you never get a stain potentially? Or are we talking technology in the processing? Are we talking technology, literally technology, where like now we get lamps that have USB and Lightning C's in the bases? Like, can you give me a little bit more on the tech side of the forecast?
So yes, it's all of those things.
Okay.
And our forecast right now, so one of our major trends that we're forecasting, we're calling Metascape. Okay. So it's sort of this concept of the metaverse pushing on to our expectations of what the real world should look like. So our twist on tech at this point is really being driven by the AI revolution. And the fact that, I mean, I was literally laughing last night. I made my older son take a video of this, but I have a 14-year-old daughter. I go upstairs after work and I can hear her having a conversation. Now, usually she's on an Xbox, or whatever, or she's on her cell phone with her friends. Last night, she's got the Oculus on her head. You don't need the handhelds anymore. So she's just moving her hands around space and touching things. And I can hear her boyfriend on the phone, 14 years old. I go, what are you guys doing in there? And she goes, we're at a casino. We're winning. And I'm like, I hope you're not betting real money. And, I'm trying to like give her a drink. She's like opening her mouth kind of. She's like, I can kind of see you. But, we joke, but this is the whole next generation, how they're living experiences. And so, I don't know if you're on AI or if your listeners, I think we're all on it, whether or not we realize it. Because even at this point, you go onto Facebook and it says, do you want AI to assist you with this post? So it's embedded in everything we're touching. And certainly, the new apps, the large, learning models that are ChatGPT, esque, that are able to not only produce written content really quickly, but are able to produce visuals in an instant when you're just kind of prompting it, is absolutely impacting our expectation of what our real world should look like. And so we're going to see surrealism as a trend in 2026 and beyond. Our Metascape trend is sort of the tip of the iceberg for 25.
Yeah, it's wild. I remember in university my roommate had Nintendo. This is how old I am. And I used to say to her, stop playing with the Nintendo No Friendo box, because it was like, you would sit in a room by yourself. And now, like your daughter, my sons, and even I bought my husband the Meta glasses for
Yeah.
Christmas, like the
Ray-Bans?
things
Yeah.
on your
Yeah.
face so that
Oh, yeah. The Oculus
like
thing. Yeah.
he can play golf with his buddies. And so now
Yes.
they play golf and they do, and it's all, but I've also seen those horrific, I'm sure you have too. They're kind of funny, but horrific at the same time. Like these people who are running around their house and smashing up the walls and
Just sent it to
like
my
take them.
family.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway, but yeah, it's wild. And so I put it on and I did a YouTube video to walk around a city that we're thinking about visiting. Now it made me a wee bit nauseous, but that's a whole other, but it's
Yeah.
wild what's happening in this world and people, designers are using those goggles now with their designs. Like they're having clients walk through
Yep.
their homes, their proposed designs prior to buying anything. You can literally walk through your space. So it's wild what that's why I was asking more about the AI, because smart
Yeah.
homes are becoming such a big thing for us. But I was just curious how you were going to play it. Okay, Stacy, let's get down to the six trends for 2025. I'm sorry it was a long way here, but I can't wait to hear.
No, that's good. Well, we already talked about one of them. So we're working
Yes.
backwards at
Yeah.
this point because that's usually the one I end with. It's the most
Okay.
futuristic, but it's so important. The other thing with that is new manufacturing process. So, like you're saying, 3D printing, being able to create objects in a method that didn't exist a decade ago. And so
Hmm.
you're sort of pairing all of these new concepts with newer manufacturing process and being able to produce some really amazing design. So that's very fun. We have also a trend that we're calling Oasis. I'm going to say that's the opposite of Metascape. Oasis, we're saying, is a digital detox. It's the idea of escaping the digital world, reconnecting with ourselves as human beings in a human body, being able to take a breath, right? The listeners can do that with us now if we just did like a just 10, 20 seconds. And we go, oh, yeah, here I am. So it's creating spaces that are absent of all of the screens that allow us to connect with nature, to each other. And it is influenced, of course, by sustainable design. That's been around a long time. The new iteration of Oasis is the concept of putting wellness at the forefront. So in
Hmm.
your home, in hospitality markets, creating spaces of decompression, whether it's to meditate, to unwind, it's a nightly ritual, it might be a yoga practice, it might just be a place to read in quiet, an actual physical book. So, you know, being conscious that we require resting periods to actually maximize on our health and wellness is a huge driver right now. And we're seeing it in multifamily, we're seeing it in amenities spaces, we're seeing it in airports. I mean, I don't know if you've been to an airport where they say, here's a prayer room. It's like a
Hmm.
prayer and meditation room. We need those spaces. So that's one of the big trends that we're seeing for. And again, when I say 2025, in the world of interior design, our expectation is trends are going to happen over time. So they're not like fast fashion. It's not like, oh, it's Barbie core and then it's out next season. These are trends that you can put your money into, put your investment into, and feel very confident that when we track them and call them trends, trends happen over time. These should be relevant for years to come. And we're going to see them evolve. So I always tell people when you're tracking trends, look for evolution, not revolution, so that you
Hmm.
feel comfortable that you're investing in something that's here to stay. So this is, again, we're seeing this iteration into wellness, but it's not going anywhere. It's going to continue to evolve in the landscape with, new looks so that things always feel sort of fresh and new, but it's a trend that's going to be here a long time. So Oasis is one of our trends. We have another trend that we're calling tactile luxury, sort of inspired by what we're seeing in the world of fashion, of this what's called quiet luxury in the world of fashion. It's about less but better. It's taking those investments, like you said, it might be $117 a yard fabric, it might be more, but we're going to invest in quality over quantity. And we're going to create spaces that are highly edited, but feel very warm, inviting, almost womb-like. Again, a form of escape, a form of quiet. It is a form of refined luxury. So we're calling it tactile luxury because it's all about the chunky textures. It's about layering different patinas with beautiful, luxurious textures like velvets, like chenilles, like some of the oversized bouclés. So again, bouclés not leaving the building, faux furs, some beautiful sheepskin-like fabrics that we're seeing, and then walls that are looking like limestone, lime wash,
Hmm.
beautiful patinas that we're seeing, like even aged concrete can come in and not feel cold if you can do it with a contrast of warm materials with it. So that's our tactile luxury trend. We have a trend called opulent heritage. So we're seeing a return to classic and traditional, which is completely new for our younger designers, right? I mean, they haven't seen a fringe or a
Yeah.
tassel, or a bullion or a skirted sofa probably in their lifetime, unless they were like visiting Granny's house and that's what she's still living with. So this whole return to classic design, we were sort of seeing again in the cultural lexicon, sort of the Bridgerton effect on things. of this beautiful Regency style that's impacting. But we're also seeing it as a sustainable trend because in the world of interior design, it's going back to antique pieces and vintage pieces and giving them a whole new life in your home. So I think there's going to be, some of that impacting as well. I like it. I mean, for me, it's like, ooh,
I do too.
it's fresh and new again, so that's a fun trend. We have one that we're calling imperfect expression. So imperfect expression is our global trend. It's sort of like our new nomad. It is eclectic, it's collected. We're seeing inspiration from African mud cloths to Aboriginal art. And so it's very layered and it's very much about having the artist in hand. So this is a maker's trend. It's about one of a kind pieces. It's about supporting local artists and artisans and craftspeople. It also has a sustainable story because it is local sourced. And so you sort of think about how you can layer those individual pieces into your space, whether it's in furniture, rug, artwork, accessories, lighting, all kind of top to bottom. Even in stone, I mean, even things like terrazzo floors, that might be done, or mosaics, tile that might be put in by a local artisan. So thinking about really how to layer those kind of interiors, again, embracing the imperfect, embracing that concept that it is not 3D printed, it is not computer generated, it is a human being who put soul into these pieces. And so it is this sort of soulful, bohemian, eclectic story that we're seeing. And did we talk about all of them? We did Oasis,
I think we have one
tactile
more.
luxury, opulent heritage, imperfect expression. Which one am I missing? I have to think about this for a second. I don't have my slides in front of me. Metascape, and I'll have to look it up. Now I have to cheat.
No worries, no worries. I do. I also love the opulent heritage. I think it's my background, like that classic. Like I'm a true classicist anyway, but coming from an Irish household, when you go back to Ireland, everything is very much in that opulent heritage vibe, and so it makes me feel very at home. But I realize, like you said, like my children would feel. I remember my son. We were somewhere. I don't know, traveling, and we were in a very nice hotel, and it had that kind of vibe. And he goes, "This feels like Nana's house." Like he didn't like
I
it at all.
Yeah, it wasn't. It felt old
Yeah.
lady. I
Yeah, he
know.
was like, "Oh, I think we were in like Florida or something where he expected it to have a whole other vibe." And he was like, "This just feels like we're at Nana's." Like he was so not into it.
It's
So I
so
think it's
funny.
retro revival. Samantha just gave us
I
one
know
all
it is.
like,
And I'm like,
yeah.
I looked it up and I was going to say, how did I forget my favorite trend? Because
Yeah.
it's literally my favorite one, which is retro revival. I'm a 70s child. This one brings me
Mhm.
right back home. And this trend is a mix of the 70s and 80s. So she's saying it's early. It's early in the morning, everybody who's listening out there. I've only had a half a cup of coffee. So normally I thrive on espresso. But yes, retro revival is such a fun trend. This is one to me that like it almost doesn't matter what's happening in the world. If you lean heavy into this trend, it's super confident. It's so happy. It's like you're going to bring in some sunshine into your space. It's like a counterculture trend. And again, it has this huge like vintage vibe look to it, but it's not like replicating the Brady Bunch house. It is about taking some of that 70s element and mixing it with early 80s so that there's almost a little more edge to it. It's a bright, vibrant palette. It's sort of like candy color. So we're seeing like, fun pinks, the avocado greens coming back, orange, yellow. It's pattern on pattern. So we're seeing checkerboards and squiggles and florals. Really, really fun interior design here. I see this as a more youthful palette, but we're seeing it all over. Like I'm seeing this even in luxury design, where we're bringing in burled wood pieces, whether they're
Mm.
vintage or not. We're seeing that as a new wood trend that's been kind of coming in. Chunky acrylic furniture, chunky acrylic accessories are coming into this trend. Um, Even like think about the color of stone, the marbles that we're using in spaces, whether they're in bathrooms or kitchens, but like green and pink. So the colored marbles are coming back. So you can really make this a luxury trend as well as sort of a very playful trend. And we're seeing it trickle down. Um, there was a magazine this summer, Living, Etc., this past summer that did an entire issue on this concept that they were calling playfulism. So it was just leaning into our interiors as play, leaning into our spaces as a place that we can play. And that might mean painting your ceilings a fun color and dripping it down the wall. It's really sort of like there's no rules except to be bright and colorful and have fun and create a space that every time you open that door, you can't help but smile. So I love this trend. Another term for it is dopamine decor, if you're
That's
hearing
fun.
it. So it
Yeah.
is putting, these fun, bright palettes together and just embracing it.
So I know as you were explaining each trend, and I'm sure everyone listening is doing the same thing because we're creatives, designers, decorators, whoever's listening. I had like a visual for each one. So like, the Oasis, of course, we're all picturing very serene spaces, spa like. Then we did the opulent, everyone had a visual. And as I'm doing this, I can kind of put these types of spaces into certain places in the world. Like I think I mentioned England and Ireland when we talked about the opulent. You
Yes.
kind of think California vibe. So you travel all over and you're doing talks everywhere. Are you finding that some of this is more geographically indicated where people use it, or do you think it's just diverse and it's whatever people just prefer to have in their home?
Yeah, I think geography plays a role in sort of tolerance of what people find acceptable. I still think there are many homeowners who are still very concerned about like what their mother-in-law is going to say, what their friends are going to say, right? So there's that kind of societal pressure that people put on themselves. It's our job as designers to help them lean into their own aesthetic and do what pleases them, not necessarily what's going to make their friends happy. So, I think that there's always some element of that, of kind of what's acceptable by geography. I'm also a believer that we should respect sort of the integrity of the home itself. So, like if you're designing, a colonial home, you're going to design it different than you would something that looks like a cabin, right? Now I think sometimes you can go for the irony in it, and that's an intentional decision. But I try to, sort of at least connect the dots to try to respect the integrity of whatever the original architecture was. That's my personal flavor. I do think, again, coming back, geography plays a piece. However, the landscape has been changed. And we see it in fashion. It's always like we're all on social media, we're getting everybody's feeds, we're seeing the world through that lens. And so, what is acceptable today is very different than what was acceptable 15 or 20 years ago. So, for me, it's really embrace it, have fun. As I travel around the country, so far I've done 9 of these talks where we're bringing the trends to life in different cities through product showcases, through a 45-minute keynote, really trying to explain to the designers what's driving the trends, how they can spot the trends themselves. But it's always fascinating because at the end, I'll ask, what was your favorite? And in every city, there are some people who like this and some people who like that. And there's not a trend that's been left behind yet of like nobody likes it. So it's interesting to see, the feedback from people and what's speaking to them. I'll say, the retro revival, it's like, I think if you grew up in the era, it has that element of nostalgia, but the younger generation is really, really digging it. So I think it's that, fun, it's personality, it's creative, it's happy. They're also really liking, like you said, maybe not your son's young, but the 20 somethings are leaning into the opulent heritage because it's new to them.
So it's funny that you said that because I was thinking about the revival and I'm like, that's because the technology of fabrics. I was thinking how itchy
Yeah.
my
Your
grandma's sofa.
polyester clothing was,
Yeah,
or yeah.
like the tweed, that's all those beautiful heavy tweeds are back and plaids and things. But I remember how itchy my Nana's sofa was. And so now,
Yes.
thank God for technology and soft fabrics, you can have this revival of all these retro to
Yes.
us they're
And
retro
they're
and they're
supple and
yeah,
yummy.
and
Uh-huh.
inviting. You can
Yes.
definitely go have a nap on that sofa and not like come out with a rash on your cheek. Okay, so you know what's coming for 2027 and beyond. What are you most looking forward to?
I'm excited about, again, the idea of taking risk with design. So I think there's always going to be, the safe choice of these sort of evolution of Oasis that we're seeing. That's not going away. This tactile luxury is so classic. You can't go wrong with it. But I'm seeing this whole renaissance of design of surrealism and, what we're seeing in tech and what we're seeing in these virtual worlds starting to be illuminated in the real world. And so I think this will come in the form of art pieces, but they'll also come in the form of functional pieces. So we may see lamps that look like sculptures that
Hmm.
have, lighting embedded in them. So they function as a light, but they look like a beautiful sculpture. So I just think there's going to be a lot of creativity that's going to be unearthed in the next few years. And again, a return to color. So, I think people will get more
Thank goodness.
comfortable with color again. And the more we're exposed to things, it's almost like you become desensitized to it, which is how the 70s, everybody's wearing this like wild stuff and their homes were wild. Over time, you're looking for things that make you happy. And so you'll lean into those and more apt to take risks. So I'm excited about the optimism that I'm seeing in the world of design, regardless of what's happening in the world. I think design is a way for us to create a place of escape for the people we're designing for the people we're hosting, for ourselves, and to, create a space that, again, no matter what is happening on the outside, inside, I can create a cocoon, I can create a little pot of happiness, I can create a space that lifts up my spirits. And we're seeing a lot more of that.
I love that because, like, to your point, in the 70s, or, my home that I'm in was built in the 70s. And when we took it, we ripped it apart and then moved in, but it had pink toilets, pink sinks with brown countertops. There was shag carpet on one of the bathroom
Oh.
floors. And I happen to know the two boys that grew up in there. So just mull that one over for a few minutes. There was a bathroom with green sinks, green toilets. The fridge was green. Like, people were brave and
Yep.
not afraid of color. And I'm so grateful to hear that's coming, because I have to tell you, I'm so tired of the beige and the grays. I'm always saying to our clients, you're going to crave color. You can't live in an all beige environment or an all gray environment and think that that is like giving some kind of vibe of personality, right? It's absent of color. So I'm so grateful to hear that that's coming, and that people are, like you said, hopefully they get used to seeing the color and get out of that box of neutral is everything and have some fun with their spaces. Stacy, where can our followers, listeners follow you? Can you tell us, like, website, Instagram, wherever you
Perfect.
want people to find you?
Okay, good. Yes, I'm on Instagram at Stacy Garcia Studio. So you'll see all about the trends there. That's our business. If you want to follow me personally, it's Garcia_Globetrots, and I'll post different travels that I'm doing and things that are inspiring me. Also online at stacygarcia.com. And if you go onto our blog, you can see all about the different trends that we're talking about. And there's a download as well that you can fill out, and you'll get the entire trend report into your inbox. And so that would be on our website at stacygarcia.com if you're interested in learning more about these trends.
Thank you so much for teaching us so much about trend setting and what it
Yeah, my
takes to
pleasure.
forecast a trend. I really appreciate your time. Thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. And hey, one more shout out too is, if you're listening, you're an interior designer, you're designing your home, we have lots of product that we've developed under these trends. So you'll get a sneak peek at those on our website as well. And,
Perfect.
just wishing you all happy designing.
And I'll put all of this in the show notes so you can find all these links and find where to find Stacy and all of her fantastic products. So thanks again.
Thank you.